We're doing a book review today. We're doing a book review of my book first. I'm going to be reviewing a number of art books, a number of drawing books, but in this video, we're going to be talking about my art book that I printed up a number of years back. And in this book, I have lots and lots of drawings that I did of people on public transit and at cafes. And I'm going to be doing demos to show you how I did some of these techniques. I'm going to be telling stories about how I drew these pictures. But before we start, I have a question for you. Are you mostly inspired by what you hear and you're fine with that on these videos? Or would you like to get better at drawing? Would you like to improve your drawing skills? The reason why I ask is because I want to know my audience better. I want to get to know you better. I want to know if most of my audience are just looking to listen and see what and get inspired, or if they actually want to improve their skills if you come to this channel to learn how to improve your skills. The reason why I ask that is because I have an online course, High Powered Drawing. The link is in the description, as well as an ebook, The Drawing Toolbox, that are packed with fundamentals that actually help me become better at art, help me become better at drawing in a very short period of time. It took me years of trial and error to learn a lot of different techniques and taking art classes and all this other stuff. And when I met my mentor, he showed me some very basic principles that helped me be able to draw anything. Now, a lot of times when you go to art classes, you'll learn how to draw this, you'll learn how to draw that. But then when you come away from the art class, you want to draw something that you think is more complicated, such as a skeleton or something like that. You may say, oh, I need to go take another art class, or I need someone to show me how to do that. Well, these fundamentals will allow you to be able to draw anything. All right, so the link is in the description. Let's jump in. Okay, so the very first picture, we have a drawing of Ruth Smith. Then we open the book and we come to the first page. I'm not sure what this page is called, but like one of those pictures that they show when a book is opening and then you see the title. But this drawing here, obviously you could see that I was really big on making the hair look real. And so in this one, she had really cool curly type style. She reminded me of Cree Summers, her hair texture, the girl from A Different World. I don't know if you guys remember that show, but she actually had this really curly type hair. And this is the way that I approached that style. So starting off with really wavy lines, and I could have just did a bunch of wavy lines like this. But what I quickly realized is that, these are just individual lines. So I sat there and I actually looked at the hair for a minute. So you'll notice a lot of times when you're drawing, especially the way that I teach drawing, is to keep the pen moving the whole time, but then analyze what you're looking at. So what I did is not only did the wiggly line, but I also started experimenting around with doing more lines in here like this and in here like this. And this is not easy to do when you're drawing someone who is actually, you never know when they're going to get up from the bus or the cafe. And a lot of times I am drawing at cafes and on the bus. And so doing this style was not the easiest thing to do. So I had to learn the technique. I had to, after a while of drawing, I usually get in the zone. And so what happened is that I got really comfortable in what I was doing and I started to develop a rhythm. And you'll notice that when you're drawing someone, you'll start to develop a rhythm after a while. You know what I mean? So like what I mean is that you see how now I'm doing this a lot faster than I did it before. And the muscle memory, I've done this so many times that the muscle memory is like pasted into my subconscious mind so that I could do this pretty fast. And so doing all these different wiggly lines, and then you have some lines that just are very faint. Like these lines here, they're really, really faint. You could barely see them like that. So I'm kind of sort of like barely holding the pen. So I'm holding the pen in different ways at different times. So when I'm doing this, I'm holding it a little bit more tighter, not tight, not holding too hard, but a little bit more control of the pen. Whereas now I'm really like really loose with the pen and just kind of letting the the um the pen just kind of move on the page. And I'm also getting like a little jittery effect with it. You know what I mean? Like kind of just letting my hand do something like this. So that way I could come with the spontaneous wiggles that are in hair. If you look at hair, it's going to have, you know, some hairs have the nice curl and curvature in a person's hair, but then there's going to be other hairs that are just kind of loose and just kind of doing their own thing. Now, if the person just has straight hair, then yeah, all their hair is going to be coming like this, right? But her hair was more of a really tightly curled hair, and so you have these big curls, and then you have these tight curls up in here. So I had to do build up, and what I did was is I naturally build up over time instead of trying to do something like this, which is a looks less natural, right? But if I build up over time and just be patient with it and come with different types of lines, then what'll happen is the hair will start to look more natural over time. But it's a buildup. So it took time for me to get through this drawing, as well as the eyebrows and the eyelashes. And so these things they all kind of work together. And then this line here, a lot of times when I'm drawing, I'll draw a rectangle around, and it's more from like just looking at a bunch of graphic novels and being influenced by comics. So that's what this line is. You just can't see the rest of the rectangle in the background. But once I draw the face and the nose and the eyes, that stuff goes really fast because usually I'm using one line to just draw this here, or very few lines to draw this here, and then go for the eyebrows. But once I come to the hair, this is where I really dwelled into the drawing for a long period of time. And you see all these different strands and textures. This drawing here, I actually did a review of this book. I talked about some of the drawings in this book, but I didn't go as deep as I'm going to go in this video. So in this drawing here, I have a combination of shading as well as very fine lines. So if you look here, you could actually see that the lines in her hair are really, 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 really fine, right? Like right here, it's super faint, super thin. Right here, there's actually some lines here. You could barely see them, but there's some lines there right here and right here. So I was really looking at a lot of, around this time, I was heavily influenced by Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. And I talk about them a lot, and that's where I got a lot of my inspiration from. I've looked at a lot of other artists over the decades, but I get a lot of my inspiration from them. And what I'm mostly inspired by with them is how this is all they did all day long. And so because they all day long, their whole life was dedicated to art, what happened was they were able to get like fine details, like things like this, like the stitch in here. If you look at this stitch, that stitch is very, very hyper detailed, right? And you can see both sides of it. So not only did I just draw a line, but I'm doing both sides of the line. So you can see this side of the line and that side of the stitch. So that's what I'm doing here. And I'm carefully doing this over time. And it didn't take me that long to do it because once I'm in a drawing session, what happens is I start to develop a rhythm of drawing. And so I actually have stitch here. And I don't know if you can see this stitch here, but it's very faint, this stitch here. Super faint, right? This is like I'm barely touching the paper, barely handling the pen. So very delicate line right there, right? That's what this stitch is here. And then this is the texture of the inside of her hoodie. And you probably could barely see that. Same thing. I'm barely letting the pen just kind of drag on the paper. And so you get this dark area here and then the light area here. That transition, that's called line weight. So as I talked in previous videos, a dark line, a light line, the difference between these two, this is called line weight. And when you transition a line from dark to light to dark to light to dark to light, when you do like that, that's when your drawings are going to be much more interesting visually, depending on what style you're going for. But here you can see I actually did very faint lines here, and then I come back over with a darker line here. And so it creates this effect that when the viewer looks at the image, they're not 100% sure of what's magical about it, but they do know that something's going on beyond what they understand, and it looks really cool to look at. So, and that's because we have a combination of these very faint lines here that you could barely see, and then the harder lines, the darker lines that you can see. Now, what the mind does when a viewer looks at this, an image like this, like let's say these little hairs right here that you could barely see, right? What happens is a viewer starts to say to themselves subconsciously, they don't consciously think about this a lot of times, unless they're really versed at looking at art and things like that. But the average viewer, when they look at this, is they're saying to themselves, wow, this person took the time to do these really delicate lines. And a lot of times we're in a rush to complete our work, so we don't do little things like this. And a lot of times it's because people don't know about line weight. But when you learn about it, a lot of times we're rushing through the drawing, and that's why our drawings don't have that animation and that magic in them that make them look realistic. Back in the day, those old masters, this is all they did was do art. This is what they studied. Their whole life was dedicated to this. And so they took their time. So a lot of with these drawings during this period in 2011, my main goal and objective was, because I wasn't making very much money, I would teach like maybe an art class here or there. So I had a lot of free time. And my main objective was to try to pretend that I lived in a time period that Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo and all these old masters, Rembrandt and all these guys, I wanted to pretend that I lived back then, and that becoming really good at capturing energy and life in a drawing was just as important to me as it was to them. In our modern day and time, what happens is we get really busy with email, families, and all this other kind of stuff. We have so many things distracting and pulling at our attention that art becomes like secondary, third dairy, fourth dairy, and it just is not as important as all the other things we have in our life. Well, what I was trying to do is I was trying to pretend that I was going to, be living in this time period, and I was one of the Leonardo da Vinci's or the Michelangelos, and my books were going to be looked at centuries later. So this was a thing. I don't necessarily tell all of my students to do this, but this is just something that I was doing back then to kind of, really pump myself up to study this stuff. So in this drawing here, you could actually see that I was really doing the same thing that I was talking about here, where we have the heavy and the very fine lines. Here, I have really dark lines and then those really fine lines. You should try this in your next drawing, in your next couple drawings. Try doing some drawings or some lines where you do really faint lines that you barely drag in the pen on the paper, and then mix it up with thick lines. And I have a strategy as to where I put the thick lines and where I put the thin lines. And so what I did here is I actually did the really thin lines for the eyebrows here. And I did really thin dots for the skin. just little moles and little things for the skin. And it really helps to sell the fact that her skin was older. And I also wanted to try to make her look older without going so hard on the wrinkles and drawing too much attention to the wrinkles, because she had really nice skin to be her age. She was an older woman, but she did have some features in her face that made her look older, and I wanted to show those without drawing too much attention to them. So this is where I put those really faint, subtle lines here, and same here, right? And also, I did it with the texture of the jacket. This is like the elastic of the inside of the collar of the jacket. Very faint lines. Why? Because I don't want to draw too much attention here. And zippers are something that I really love to draw. I've been in love with drawing zippers for a very long time. And so I could draw this pretty fast. I have like a muscle memory of the way that I draw a zipper. This is how I do it. I just do this like really zigzag. So I'll get the line of the path of the zipper. Then I go in. And the only reason I'm able to do this pretty fast is because I've done so many, I literally take time to learn how to draw things separately. So in a lot of exercise programs, you'll do full body workout. You'll work out your whole body, so that way, you know, your torso's strengthen, your legs are strengthened and everything. But then you have isolated workouts that maybe just focus on the arms or the legs. So during different periods of my drawing development, I will focus on different things. And so during this period, I was focused on zippers. You know what I mean? And then there was other periods where I focused on stitch. And then I had other periods where I was focused on, you know, glasses or something like that, and watches and accessories. So this is a drawing of a good friend. She's passed now. She's transitioned. Her name is Bola Thompson. And she actually, I was teaching her and Ruth. I was teaching her and Ruth at the same time. So she would come over a lot of times during the sessions. And what I typically do when I teach people in person is I will draw them while they draw me. And so she was drawing me. That's why you see her looking at the camera. I always say looking at the camera. So your eyes are the camera. So if someone's looking at you, then they're looking at the camera. But, you know, she was looking at me while I'm drawing her. And I really liked her hair texture. She had what we'll call sister locks. And so these are very, very thin locks, like dreadlocks. Some people call them dreads, some people call them locks, but they were very thin. And so I took care to actually do the same thing here. I did really heavy lines, really dark lines, and then very thin lines. And this is something you'll see throughout my work. And this, I'm telling you, this will help your work transition overnight, learning how to do the thick and thin, right? So if you just incorporate this one tip, your drawings will change dramatically, okay? Here's a mistake. I didn't mean to draw this line here at the bottom of her nose. A lot of people don't even see these mistakes and the way the bottom of this nose look. This is a mistake, right? I have a lot of mistakes in my drawings and I call them out in my videos. Why? Because this is what it looks like when you're developing and you're growing as an artist. And I'm honest, I'm not trying to hide it, so I didn't try to correct it. I didn't go over it with whiteout or anything to change it. I just left it. So this is a clear mistake of the bottom of the nose. Now that you see it, you can see it plainly. Now your eye is going to be drawn to that mistake. But before I showed you, more than likely, you probably didn't even see it. Some of you may have caught it. Some of you may not have. But her eyes, the way her eye opening was. Now, what I used to do is, I would think of myself as like one of these old masters. I'm living in that time period. And everywhere I went, I'm looking at things as if I were going to draw it. So literally 24/7, I'm thinking about drawing. If I'm talking to somebody, I'm looking at their face and studying their face. And that's where I get all of this line energy from. So like this here, these little wince, wrinkles, crow's feet on the corner of the eyes, I sometimes hold my breath when I'm actually drawing certain areas. I will literally hold my breath because I don't want, as you inhale, your body moves just a little bit. And then as you exhale, your body moves a little bit. Well, sometimes I would hold my breath just to get certain lines in without being contaminated by the movement of my breath. Think about that, right? So this is how deep I went into this stuff, right? And so even here, you can see like with her lips, they're really dark here. And then the line gets very faint and subtle here, darker line, and this line transition into a lighter line. This is what I look at when I look at my favorite art books is I look at line quality, right? And so I'm going to be doing some book reviews on this, going through some of my favorite art books just so you guys can see the kind of stuff that inspires me. But when you look at this here, very dark, it starts off really dark and then it transitions to lighter, thinner, dark, lighter, thinner, dark, really dark, because I want this eyebrow muscle right here to really, I want that to really pronounce that curve right there, that contour of her face. So I go really dark here, then I go lighter here, like so light that you could almost see it. Then I go darker here again. And it's really that balance of light, of hard lines, thick lines, or what I call bold lines and thinner lines. That's really what creates a lot of the magic in here. Of course, there is structure and understanding, but I never took an anatomy class. I never really studied anatomy. And so when you're looking at this stuff, a lot of times you might be thinking, oh, well, they understand anatomy and muscle and all this other stuff. I didn't study that stuff at this time. I'm studying all this other kind of stuff because again, I was trying to figure out what are these old masters thinking about? What made their work look the way it did? What gave them that magic in their work? So like right here, she had a little bit of eyelashes, but then some of them weren't there. And then there was like a subtle, very, very subtle eyeliner. And so I just put a little here, little here, little here. Then also trying to think about how to draw the detail of the cheeks and things like that without overdoing it. In this drawing, you can see that I'm really doing this really faint line thing here. I believe this hat was made of straw or something like that. And so trying to suggest the texture of the lines going this way without drawing them too hard. And again, the difference between a very thick line right here and then these thin contrasted with these thin lines here. And the lines don't even carry all the way around to the side of the hat. Most of the time you would think that these lines would carry to the side of the hat, but they don't. Here's a mistake here. Not sure how this line got in there or even this line here, right? But that's what happens when I'm drawing is I don't clean up anything. This line here is another mistake. This is a smudge that came in there. So these are things that I just leave in here and you don't even notice it when you're looking at the drawing for the most part. But then, what happens is when I point them out, now all of a sudden you see them. Can you find any other things about this drawing that maybe you wouldn't have normally noticed? Like this hat, this line carries all the way through here and it carries all the way through here. But you wouldn't even notice that had I not pointed that out. And this is why I teach a lot of people don't try to correct. Just draw, just let it happen and let whatever happens because it makes the drawing look more entertaining. This guy was on the bus. I remember he was on the AC Transit bus and he was taking some sort of notes. One thing about this drawing is I really wanted to capture the knuckles of his hands. I have pretty pronounced knuckles myself, and because he was older, his hand had a certain texture to it, And I wanted to suggest that because sometimes you can't tell the age of a person when you're looking at them, but then when you look at their hands, you could definitely see that they may be older. And so I wanted to show that here and in this finger here, as well as in these fingers here. I wanted to kind of try to suggest that this person was older. And he had like some sort of jumpsuit jacket on with, I believe, the Adidas three stripes, the three stripes of Adidas going down his sleeve. And I wanted to show that, but I didn't also notice that I just there's no line here that connects this, right? So you would think like this is the shoulder, this is the arm. You would think that there would be a line there. There's no line there. And that's playing around with, just trying out different styles. And this is what you should do in a sketchbook is you should try different things out. Don't always try to do things the way that you know how to do them, because when you do things the way that you know how to do them, you could probably do them really good, but then you won't be learning and you won't be growing because you're not trying anything new. Zippers. And if you look at this zipper, it's very tightly detailed. It's kind of different than a lot of the other zippers I do. And that's because he had like a sweatsuit sweatsuit jacket, and those zippers are really tight. So I was trying my best to try to communicate that. As well, we have really dark lines, and then we have the subtle lines of I think he had like a little bit of mustache, and I just wanted to show a little bit of that. And then also these little marks on the face. This stuff right here adds a lot of character, a lot of life and character to your drawings. Now, there's a smudging, this particular pen I use, this is a 1.6. It's a bold tip. 1.6 just means it's bold. And so what that is that most pens, when you draw, have about a line that's about that thick. This pen is much thicker. And so I use a 1.6 tip, this 1.6 here. I use this because it helps me with thicker lines. And then I can also transition to very thin lines. So I could go from thick to really thin to thick to really thin to thick to really thin. And so that's why I like to use this bold pen, because I get more of a range in the variation of my lines. So here, you actually see that. You see that right here, I'm drawing the structure of the outer structure of his body, the contour of his arms and his shirt and his neck and his head. And those lines are, a little bit thicker at certain areas. Like right here, it's thicker at the knuckle, thicker right there, definitely thicker at the back of the head. And then you see this really jagged line here. Sometimes when I'm riding a bus or the train, obviously the train is going to be moving and transitioning and doing all kinds of things. And it'll cause my lines to get disrupted, while I'm drawing. And I'll start making little agitations or whatever right here. I don't say mistakes because I have this saying that mistakes only add life and character to your work. And now I don't like to call them mistakes depending on what it was. So like with this other drawing, when I did this wasn't intentional. This was the hat. I was drawing the hat, and then I drew this here. Not necessarily a mistake, just a part of the drawing. This is a mistake here because my hand probably smeared it, right? That was unintentional. Whereas this here was just something that happened because I was riding the train. This is one of my favorite drawings because I feel like I really captured this guy deeply into thought. It's something about the way his eyes are looking down at his phone. He's actually looking at his phone. And it's something about the way he's, kind of, I don't know if he was pinching his eyebrows or, he kind of had his hand on his face. You know how sometimes when you're just looking at something, you put your hand on the side of your head. He really looks like he's like really deep off into it. And I feel like I captured that energy here. As well, I have these very faint lines. These were drawstrings. These were very thick drawstrings. And I go really thin on the lines. So like these lines here, a lot of times we'll draw hands, but we will leave these little details out. I tried to add those details in there just to add a little bit of character. As well, you see that I added the holes for the button where the stitch holes go. That was pretty fun. Just trying to look at what detail can I add that would bring this drawing more to life. Like right here, you could actually see that I did this buttonhole, where this button here goes in here, and I guess it fastens the jacket closed. I actually drew that hole, whereas a lot of times we would just draw over that and just, keep going, and we wouldn't do that level of detail. Also, the detail in his sleeve, when you have a sweatsuit jacket or a jacket or something and it has like the elastic part right here, this is what I drew here. And I really like the way that I captured this because you can see that I made the line come here, but then it stops in this area. There's nothing there. That's just me literally just playing around with style, right? And so it does give the effect that, there's like a fold in this fabric here, and then it kind of pans out over here. Also, the folds in the jacket here. I love that's like one of my favorite things to draw is folds in fabric. Zippers, there's the zipper. And then I went really dark on the cell phone just to kind of bring the cell phone forward in the picture. Now this drawing, I believe I painted it while I was on the train. If I remember correctly, I believe I painted this while I was on the train. And this was a really fun drawing to do. This is when I actually experimented around with blending my different watercolors together. So right here, I have this yellow, orange, and then it blends into this green, orange blending into green. I was kind of playing around with that at that time. So there's a number of different colors in here, but they're all blended in together and they create one visual effect. And this guy had like some sort of beanie, like a knit beanie, and I was trying to capture the texture of that beanie. So if you see here, you notice that there's like a little texture, like a little stippling texture here. And also here, instead of just painting, doing a brush stroke where I just kind of come this way, I actually tapped it with the brush because that was the texture of this knit beanie that he had on. Here I was doing the sunglasses. I actually got really good at sunglasses around this time, drawing glasses, period. You can see a little bit of zipper there. And then we got the buttons on the shirt up under. I really did like the way that this came out though. And I believe he had a backpack on too. And so this drawing actually came out pretty cool. One thing I like about it is this really dark line here, this dark line here, and this dark line here. It's like 3 dark lines. Then you have a dark spot here. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's another one. And so you just kind of carefully choose where you're going to put your dark areas. And it's a good idea to space them out. So what I did was I actually did these dark areas, but I spaced them out. So I have one here, and one here. And it actually looks better when you see it in person versus looking at it on this camera. I'm wondering how much it translates. I can't really tell, but here I'm going dark because I want to communicate that there is some depth between the fingers. And so I go a little darker here and a little darker here and darker here to communicate that there's some space between these fingers. And I think that translated pretty well. She also had a cable knit sweater on that I tried to capture the texture in. Remember, back during this time period, I'm pretending that I lived during the Leonardo, Michelangelo days, and I'm pretending that I'm probably an apprentice to one of these guys and they're training me in drawing. So this was my goal on a daily basis, is to capture the energy. You see, you notice these fingers, you could tell that she's older by just looking at her fingers. Even if you didn't see her face here, if you're just looking at the fingers, you would be able to tell that she's older. And so that is what they were really good at back then, is capturing hands and details like that. So I was pretending like I'm living back then and they're training me on how to capture all this stuff. I hope this video was very inspiring. And since you are still watching, why don't you click the like button? That actually helps the channel grow. That helps it send it out to more people, as well as click the subscribe so that you get notifications every time I drop a video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.